We are live to YouTube. Good luck with your meeting.
Thanks, Lise. Thanks, Amanda. Have a good night.
Mr. Mayor, we are live on YouTube.
Yeah, I was here for that. I heard that. I also heard the real conversation about making salami between Councillor Bruni and Councillor Christian. Don't know a lot of councillors present though. We're missing half of one and all of two.
Two minutes to Shaw Broadcast. 1 minute to Shaw. So we're just missing Councilor Hollingsworth.
And we're just missing Councillor Hollingsworth, and I don't see the CEO on here.
Thirty seconds to Shaw. We are live on Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I want to welcome everybody to our last meeting of 2021. I want to thank our broadcasting partners and our media partners for broadcasting our media and reporting on it. Before we start the meeting, I just want to speak to the community briefly about the current state of COVID-19 in our community. In the last number of weeks, we've gone from having a very low prevalence of COVID-19 to a very high prevalence of COVID-19. And I understand that all of us, myself included, are frustrated by the length of this and finding it difficult to make the sacrifices that we need to make to comply with COVID-19 health guidance. So I want to just ask the community as we head into the Christmas season, if we can all dig deep and keep a few things really top of mind. It's important that all of us reduce our contacts as much as we can. That's not to say that we can't see some friends and family, but we should really make sure that we do so safely, and that when we do so, it's more of an important event as opposed to just a discretionary event. So we want to reduce our COVID-19 contacts as much as possible. When you are inside, we encourage you to make sure you are wearing a mask and that you're staying physically distant from people. It's best to interact with people and socialize with people in a well-ventilated area, preferably outside if the weather permits. And we want to make sure that we are all doing whatever we can to help slow the spread of the virus. It's pretty clear based on the data and the evidence that's been shared to date and been assessed by people that are a lot smarter than I am, that the new variant of COVID-19 is very transmissible, and its case counts seem to double every 3 days. So at that rate, we could have a very significant case count, not just in the province of Ontario, but in our own community of Sault Ste. Marie, that could put stress on our medical system. So I want to encourage all of you that have not been vaccinated to consider getting vaccinated, get information from reliable sources, speak to your healthcare providers. If you have children that can be vaccinated, I encourage you to get your children vaccinated. If you have your first and second dose and you qualify for your third dose, I encourage you to get your third dose. If you have your first dose and you can get your second dose, I encourage you to get your second dose. Reduce your contacts as much as you can. Wear a mask when you're inside. Engage with people as best as you can outside. Make sure that when you are inside, you're in properly ventilated spaces and you are staying physically distant. I have a lot of confidence in our community, in the fact that we can end the year strong and begin the next year strong. And I'd encourage all of you to be mindful of the advice that public health is sharing with us and to follow that advice. So, Madam Clerk, before we start our meeting, I want to acknowledge the territory upon which we are gathered, subject to the Huron-Robinson Treaty, it's traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically Garden River First Nation, Batchewana First Nation, and the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council. I want to recognize that we are the head office of Missinaba Cree First Nation. I want to recognize the Indigenous Friendship Center and their partnership with our community. I want to thank all of them for sharing their territory with us, historically known as Powhatan. Madam Clerk, if you can start the meeting, please.
I have a motion by Councillor Shoemaker and Christian, resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting and budget meeting of November 29, 2021 and December 6 and 7, 2021 budget meeting be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And with respect to declarations of pecuniary interest, I haven't received any.
Do we have any to declare, council? Seeing none.
Under agenda item 4, a motion by councillors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth resolved that the agenda for December 13, 2021 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Motion carried.
And under agenda item 5.1, a proclamation for Salvation Army Week.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I have that proclamation here. Whereas the Salvation Army is the largest non-governmental service provider in Canada, and whereas the Salvation Army has been caring for men, women, and children in Sault Ste. Marie and across Canada for over 135 years, as well as to celebrate and recognize the work and dedication of the volunteers who have helped us continue our work to the communities that we serve. And whereas the Salvation Army is distinguished by its compassion and commitment towards those it serves across a broad range of services and programs like food banks, homeless shelters, thrift stores, mental health counseling, correctional and justice services, community and family services, and more. Whereas the Salvation Army's annual Christmas Kettle campaign is a symbol of hope to people who receive care from the Salvation Army in Sault Ste. Marie each year. And therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the week of December 20th, December 24th, 2021, the Salvation Army Week in Sault Ste. Marie. Encourage our community to support the Salvation Army's efforts to give hope to people in need in our community. Thank you.
And that will take us to consent.
We are on the consent agenda, Council. I see Councilor Nero. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 6.14, the Northern Avenue Sackville Road intersection crossing guard study.
Go ahead.
If I may, a question to Mr. Rumiel.
Yep.
Mr. Rumiel, in the last couple of sentences of the report, it states that the Transit Division will continue to monitor usage and make a decision before September 2022. Is the intent that another report come back to council with the final decision?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, the engineering division makes the recommendations based on warrants and applies some traffic engineering to whether the guard is warranted. Due to the low volume of pedestrians, it's not at this time. However, the transit division handles the crossing guards and the staffing, so they're going to review through the talking to their guards how well use this is for the rest of the school year. They're going to keep the guard there for the time being, and I mean, if there is an increase in usership, they'll let us know, and we could have another look at it, or maybe make a decision on their information.
So would you need another motion to bring a final report back to council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero. I suppose another motion would ensure that whether transit or engineering would report back to you for sure.
So, Mr. Mayor, would we be able to do that now? Is move the motion, or do I need to bring that forward at another meeting?
No, I think, I actually don't think a motion is necessary, Councilor Nero. I spoke to the CEO about this matter, and we're not deciding to do away with the guard tonight or the crosswalk tonight. My understanding in speaking with the CEO is that they would return to us prior to actually finalizing that decision. But if you just want to note that for the record, that that's our expectation, I think that would be sufficient, and I'm confident that would happen.
Okay, that's fine with me, as long as we get something back, and either from transit or engineering, that's fine.
That was my understanding in agenda review, Councilor Nero, that the matter was for information tonight, but would return to us before it was finalized.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rumiel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have on the consent.
Yeah, I see the CEO is here now, so he can add to that if you'd like. Mr. CEO, was I accurate in my understanding of it?
You'll have to tell me what you discussed, Mr. Mayor. We are having technical difficulties here.
Yeah, so Councilor Nero was trying to determine through questioning of Carl Rumiel whether or not this would return back to council prior to a decision being made to remove this crossing guard. I indicated that you advised me, my understanding was you advised me in agenda review that it was for information tonight, that the crossing guard would be left there for the time being. And if that the crossing guard was going to be removed, that matter would return to council before that happened. So was I correct in that respect?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Because it's been budgeted for already, the crossing guard will remain for the remainder of this school year. And at the same time, staff will continue to monitor to see if there is a change in the traffic pattern.
Okay, so I think just to maybe deal specifically with Councillor Nero's question, he wanted to know if he should put a motion on the books to require staff to return before it made that decision. Do you believe that that's necessary, or will staff return in any event?
No, staff will return it, and we'll make sure that's noted in tomorrow's staff meeting, so there's a record of it.
Okay,
Great.
that's sufficient, Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carl. Anybody else on that matter? 614? No. Councillor Nero, do you have any other matters?
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
So listen, Councillor Gardy, Councillor Christian, Councillor Scott, can I just ask you to take your hands down so I can move the CEO onto my main screen? And I've got you listed here, so I'll make sure I come to you in that order. With I have Councillor Bezo Allen, and then I'll come to the three of you in that order. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Bezo Allen, it's your go.
Thank you so much. My first matter is on 6.5. I'm trying to bring
go
up
ahead.
here. I'm having technical difficulties too, but I think it's just the user. The Downtown Safety Initiative. My question to you, Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, have you introduced or with this initiative looked into the community safety and well-being plan that is currently completed by police services, which encounters a plan from 2021 to 2026?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesuelen. Yes, we did review that plan, and staff had worked on that in the development of that plan with the different stakeholders in the community.
Okay. And did you look at the statistics that have been provided by the Downtown Association with the paid patrols that they've had to date?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesuelen. I did present at the BIA board meeting last week, and we did review the initiative that's in front of council tonight. And they did provide information related to the safety patrols that they've undertaken. Yes.
And from that, is it determined what days and times are most valuable to have this service?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesuelen. We're going to have further discussions to look at the days and times. We don't have a comprehensive amount of information from the work that was done by the BIA to date. So our thought in framing this is that what we would do is, should council approve, we would look at an initial 3-month pilot where we could try the service out and determine how it's working. And then from there, we might be able to adjust the hours to make sure that, we're utilizing any funds most effectively.
Okay, and are you going to coordinate with police services in terms of their schedule with any further dynamic patrols?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesuelen. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I do know from some past reports, a lot of the activity was sort of that midnight to 3-4 a.m. corridor. So I would definitely recommend looking at that when businesses are closed and that sort of thing. But thank you very much, Mr. Ver. I don't have any further questions on 6.5.
You have a question on 6.5, Councillor Scott? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver. If this does go beyond, could we look at trying to get some efficiencies with some of the costs for the security patrols at the plaza? I remember we talked about I think it was about $30,000 of the plaza budget was, or the operating cost for the plaza was to be for security. So if there's a security patrol downtown, do you think we could maybe look at some overlap there, perhaps?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. Yes, I believe there's an opportunity as we look forward to the eventual, construction of the plaza to have benefits or look for synergies across these two initiatives.
And on that note, do you think this could potentially touch on the library's request that they had as well for additional security? I'm just thinking if we're going to do this, maybe there's some benefit to having the whole area just broadly covered?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. Right now, we were just looking at doing the security patrols in the evening time for the downtown safety initiative. So I believe our hours are likely outside of the library hours. But as we look forward to other safety and security initiatives, we can certainly keep the library's request in mind.
Perfect. That's everything on this. Thank you.
Anybody else on this matter? So Councillor Christian and Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver. Having read the report and recognizing that this is going to be a pilot project, are you aware of any other communities that have long-term ongoing funding for these types of initiatives? I think it's an important initiative. I think it's a good one, but the viability of it will only depend on whether we can secure long-term funding, or else, it's going to end up being an operational issue in the future.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, it's certainly something we're looking into. We haven't found another community with external funding towards this type of initiative. Certainly, we are hoping that we will be successful with our application to Health Canada, and that could turn into something that's longer term on the Downtown Ambassador program. For the evening security patrols, we haven't found anything yet from external sources, but we'll continue to look for, to determine if anything is available.
Just a quick comment. I like the part about including metrics. I think regardless of what happens in the future, if we're looking at continuing the program or discontinuing it for that matter, metrics will drive that decision. So I think it's really, really important that we're thoughtful in terms of what we want to monitor and measure. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver, is there, perhaps I've just missed it in the report, but are the patrols just in the BIA area, or are they in the area that we consider downtown, which is broader than the BIA area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, we were looking at it at the broader downtown area, the area that we, as the city have as the downtown.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And with respect to the Downtown Ambassador program, interesting. It's an interesting concept, and I hope it's successful. I wonder if are the Downtown Ambassadors going to be there for people to approach as resources, or will they be approaching people out in the downtown area to provide services if they think that there is an issue?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, both. Yes, so they will be available should people call or have an issue, but then they themselves will be in the downtown, doing patrols, and they'll be able to approach people, that they may see that, are in need of services.
Okay. Okay, and they'll keep metrics as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on that? Councillor Hollingsworth, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Ver. Could you just quickly summarize? I think this particular pilot project is one of many ideas that your team's looking at to create a safer downtown. I recall, I think it was 6 months ago, a year ago, we as council passed a resolution to say, can you look at a strategy to improve safety for downtown? So this is a really great initiative, and I'm excited about seeing the outcome. And I agree with my council members that we do need a matrix, but can you comment on potentially some other ideas that your team's looking at to create some more safety in conjunction with this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, certainly we've had a number of conversations as it relates to downtown safety. And, these two initiatives, the Downtown Ambassador and the nighttime security patrols, are, two of the immediate items we're bringing forward. Outside of that, we are continuing to work with our social services partners and look at, programming that's available on the prevention issues. We're also looking at, on the other side, activation of the downtown spaces, increasing, residential density in the downtown, complete neighborhood strategies. And so we think all of these things will work together to help improve safety in the downtown core.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful summary. It just sends a positive message that there are many ideas that you and your team are looking at. So thank you for that wonderful summary. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Do we have any other councillors that want to speak on this matter? Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Bezuallen?
Yes, I have two more. 6.7.
Okay,
Tourism Sault Ste. Marie budget. My question would be to Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, could you explain the $270,000 that has been earmarked for general development and what that general development could possibly be?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesno-Allen. We've allocated $270,000 under general development for product development. So last year, those funds included, were able to be allocated for the installation of our wayfinding, as well as construction of our new mountain bike trail network and the installation of kayak docks on the St. Mary's River to help support some of our local tour guides.
And then under what parameters do you think the team is going to want to use this new increase of funds for?
So the decision regarding the use of the funds will be determined by the Board of Tourism Sault Ste. Marie. They've identified 3 core priorities, one of which is events, in particular sporting events. They're also, there's been substantial growth of interest in outdoor adventure from visitors. And the third area that they're looking at is downtown improvements. So we're anticipating going back early in the new year to meet with the board and try to define specific priorities for those areas.
Okay, and would that include like signage, promotions, paying fees for running the events, that sort of thing?
It certainly could for events. I think there's quite a bit of room there in terms of how the funds could be used for events. It could be potentially initiating new events, supporting pre-existing events, or placing bids on events that we become aware of.
Okay. Now you also do have bid support of $40,000 in your budget. Do you think that you might go over and above that in terms of bidding?
Periodically, we become aware of very large events that require, several $100,000 to bid upon. So there could be an instance there where we pull from the general development fund to help offset those costs.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. I don't have anything further on 6.7.
anybody else on 6.7? Councillor Hilsinger, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Anderson, on the amount of money that's assigned to marketing, the $355,000, could you help us understand how those funds are prioritized in terms of what they're spent on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hilsinger, certainly. So when we look at how our marketing dollars are spent, we look at our best bet markets. So we're looking at the demographics and the persona of the travelers that are coming here. And we try to target those specific groups. We'll look at, based on traveler information that we have, either collected from key attractions or from hotel bookings at times, and also the travel to our websites. We determine what communities that we want to target, and then look at what products those people might be interested in. As you're most likely aware, some of our heavy marketing goes into the fall period, where we see a lot of demand for the fall colors and attractions to Sault Ste. Marie. We're also leaning more heavily into what's typically our slow period. So it would be the period from November to December, and then from January to April. So we've got some of the best winter assets, if not the best winter assets in all of Ontario. So we're putting in a concerted effort to try to attract more people up here during that period.
Thanks. One other question. Do you do we work with, I'm really excited to see what the board has prioritized and how they've laid out how they want to see those funds spent. I'm really happy to support it. Do we work with professional advice or support in terms of how those marketing campaigns are executed?
We have in the past, but we've got some really strong staff on board. Our marketing lead is phenomenal with the work that he's done. He's been able to utilize our social media market to really tap into key markets, and it's been really efficient in terms of dollars spent and the ability to access the right clientele. On a go-forward basis, as the markets kind of position and transition, we're regularly involved with conversations with Destination Ontario and Destination Northern Ontario to ensure that we're kind of aligned with their marketing efforts.
Yeah, they're great partners, both of them. Just one other quick question. Is it the board's role or the staff's role or a combination of both to set the targets and create the measurements and then follow through on measuring the results of those marketing campaigns?
I would say it's a bit of both. I establish KPIs for the staff that report into me, but we'll also rely on the board for broader guidance in terms of the targets that they want to set. So at this point, we're setting internally our targets for 2022, and then we'll also lean on the board to see if there's other priorities that they would like to see achieved.
Thank you. It's been such a tough couple of years for the tourism industry, and fingers crossed these plans are going to have a superb effect for our community. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. 6.7, anyone else? You have one more matter, Councillor Vezo-Allen?
Yes, I do. 6.15, the demolition of 149 Gore Street. My question, I believe, would be toward Ms. Fields.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I see Councillor Dufour and Councillor Bruni's hands also on
Okay,
this.
there's Ms. Fields. Okay, I just want to make sure she was here. Ms. Fields, to your knowledge, is this property still owned by the owner who was not compliant? And at any point, was this property available for the city to put up for tax sale?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. I think it has come up for tax sale in the past. If Michelle is on, she might be able to confirm that, but I think it did come up for tax sale. The city did not, obviously didn't sell. It did not vest in the city because there were some concerns the city had with it. And from our information, the owner is still on the property identification, although that is currently before the court. That is one of the questions that is being raised there.
So once it went up for, Michelle, you could probably answer that. Once it went up for tax sale and did not sell, why wasn't it vested?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. The first time it went for tax sale was in 2014, and we received absolutely no bids. So at that time, it did get circulated to city departments, and there was environmental issues that were identified with the property, and it was recommended not to vest it. It did go to tax sale in 2021 as well, and we still had no bids.
It did go for tax sale in 2021?
Correct.
Okay. And that was circulated widely to the community?
It gets circulated as per the requirements of under the Municipal Act for tax sale. So it's advertised in the Ontario Gazette. There's also council reports that go, which list all of the properties that are being registered for tax sale. And that's as far as it goes at this point.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I don't have anything further.
Okay, so I have Councillor Dufour and Councillor Bruni.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Michelle. Michelle, do you know approximately how much was owing in taxes when that property went to tax sale both of those times?
Sorry, Councillor Dufour, I don't have that information in front of me right now, but I can send it to council.
Okay, am I recalling correctly that in order to place a bid on that property for tax sale, that the minimum bid would have had to have been whatever taxes were owing at the time?
You are correct.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. Shea. And just as a further question through you, Mr. Mayor, to CEO White, I was wondering what steps has the city taken to ensure that we do not incur this level of exposure in the future from other buildings that are failing to comply with property standards and tax payments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, there's a number of issues around this property. So you can imagine, certainly as far as following up on vacant buildings, the passage of the new vacant buildings bylaw gives us a lot of tools to address some of the concerns that this building has raised in a much more timely fashion than we were able to before. To the specifics of your tax sale question, staff had identified quite some time ago in regarding other properties that have been listed for tax sale, yet had not sold at the tax sale, that we had some gaps in how we address the properties on an ongoing basis. So staff have been working to fill in those gaps. The legal department has added several steps in to ensure that we have greater oversight over the properties. And we have a recently revised position with the city, the risk manager position. In the latest revision to that position, some property management duties have been added to it.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and Mr. White. That's really informative. Just as a follow-up, Mr. White, I note in the report that a funding source hasn't been identified and that the city to this point has never budgeted for this kind of project due to the size of this building. Obviously, we wouldn't have that lying around. Has there been some internal staff discussion around creating a budget line for any other buildings that might be in a similar state, or is that something that we would talk about in the future as we kind of learn the lessons from this process?
Through you, Councillor, or Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, yes, we've been having some internal discussions on this item. This particular issue did raise a lot of new elements for us that we hadn't dealt with before. So we are assessing, we'll get through this one, and we are assessing how we'll deal with similar issues in the future. And that may include adding a budget line item in a future budget year.
Okay, thanks, Mr. White. I'll be following that closely. Appreciate your answers.
Hey, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the question goes to the CAO. Mr. White, I guess my concern is the loss the city is going to incur, approximately 400,000. Obviously, the property is not worth 400,000. How can we recoup some of the costs? And I notice in the report, it does state that you are looking at other ways, other avenues that may be available to the corporation to offset these costs. Can you explain that? What other ways?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, I can't explain in fine detail of what we're looking at specifically. We will be back to council on those particular matters. I can repeat what it is in the report, that we are pursuing any and all pathways to get to be reimbursed for the costs associated with this building and its demolition.
Okay. Legally, will you go after the individual?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, I can't answer that in this meeting. We will be bringing a report to a future meeting of council.
Okay, fair enough then. I won't ask anymore. Thanks.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, either to the CAO or to Mr. Posbon. Malcolm, you explained how we're going to avoid this happening in the future, but how did the building get deteriorated to such a point that there was structural collapse?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, I'll refer this one to Mr. Posabon, who's on the call and can take you through at a high level of what was being done.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. The building had a fire in it in the past, and it's not that it hasn't left our radar. We've been watching it, and basically we've boarded it a couple of times prior to putting in that property standards order for the roof that had a hole in it. And subsequently, the longer these buildings stay boarded with no heat, they continue to deteriorate. And when you have breaches in the building, it just accelerates that deterioration to the point where we are now with this building, or back in 2021, where we actually had to issue an unsafe order to take the building down.
So from my understanding of the CAO's response to Councillor Dufour earlier, there have been, it sounds like, intermediate steps put in a new policy or bylaw stating that more regular checkups will be done on buildings that are boarded up like this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Schumer, it's not so much regular checkups, but with the addition of the part-time bylaw enforcement officer, that's what we're looking at, more of a proactive approach for these types of buildings. But with council approving that vacant building bylaw, it gave us that extra tool so that these buildings don't stay just boarded and just left like that because they're just secured. It puts the accountability back on the owner to take care of their vacant building and to ensure that it doesn't further deteriorate.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, just in addition to that, I'll repeat what I had mentioned to Councillor Dufour. We have seen, aside from the work that the building division may be doing, gaps in how we deal with properties that we've put up for tax sale yet aren't sold and aren't in the end vested by the municipality. So we will be having more areas looking at it. And as I mentioned, specifically the revised position with legal, the risk manager position, will have some property management duties associated with it.
Okay. That explains how we'll prevent that going forward. And I think that makes good sense. And I think the message is that that wasn't done here, but we've learned our lesson from it. What I will add is just a comment that I'm happy that this building has been taken down. It was a danger to our community and to people getting into it and risking, the significant injury or death. And so I support the request to have taken it down. I wish it hadn't got to this point where it collapsed and became a security threat. But it needed to come down, and I fully support the request for the cost to demolish it, because it sounds like this was a worst case scenario come true.
Council, I'd just like to add my perspective to this, listening to all your questions and reading this report. I think it's pretty clear that just council term, we've communicated that we expected more and expect more with property standards and bylaw enforcement. And I think there are a few examples where we didn't, as a municipality, do the things we need to do in a timely manner to make sure that we were dealing with things properly. And this is probably one of those examples, but I'll point out that, we talked a lot about it. We have made some decisions and adjusted some policy and, sent some directives from council through to affect some change. But it's hard to affect that change without the human resource element. And this past budget, we did two things. We added bylaw capacity. So Freddie's department now has additional bylaw capacity. And we've added legal capacity so that the legal department could also deal with some of these challenges. And I think that's important because as council, we made some decisions to affect the change that we were looking to affect as a council. And, we as many municipalities, have a reactive system where we go out to a complaint or we look at something once it's brought to our attention, and we're moving from that. We're trying to move from a reactive system to a proactive system. So that's an administrative transition internally, but it also needed some resources that you made some decisions last week to attach to it. So I think on a going forward basis, you will see an improved performance in this specific respect. And I think that'll be partly because of, not just the discussion we've had and the direction that we've set, but the resources that we've now added to it. So hopefully we won't see this type of thing in the future because of the collective decisions we've been making over the last year, but that we've just resourced this week. So on a going forward basis, we should see an improvement. Anybody else in this matter? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, your comments are definitely on target. But just a quick question through you, Mayor, to Mr. White. You mentioned about number of buildings that are on this so-called list that haven't paid their taxes. Out of curiosity, on average, how long are they on the list before we actually act on them? Are we looking at a year, 2 years? And hypothetically, have we shrunken the amount of time that a building that can't be sold or hasn't been sold, shrunken it for the amount of time it's on the list? Just curiosity.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, the tax sale process is a very, very prescribed process in the legislation and all the timelines associated with it. I'll give you a very broad brush answer, and then I'll ask Ms. Schell to expand on it if necessary. There is a length of time that a property needs to be in tax arrears before a notice of tax sale can be put forward. That notice period and that part of the process also takes a certain amount of time. I would think the minimum amount of time for the start of tax arrears to property actually being put up for potential sale is about 4 years. And we would have no discretion as to that timeline. It's in the legislation. I'll ask Ms. Schell to just confirm exactly. Shelley, you're on mute.
Thanks, Malcolm. Just to clarify, the tax sale process begins when property is 3 years in arrears. So in the 4th year, we're able to register the tax arrears certificate, and year 5, we can conduct a tax sale. So between year 4 and 5, the homeowner or the ratepayer has 1 year in which to pay in full the amount that's outstanding. As for which ones are on the list, there's many recoverables that are added either through the dirty yard or derelict properties. Most of the time, those are collected before they even get to tax sale, and they're smaller amounts. Gore Street is a bit of an anomaly based on the amount that it was. And as the CAO has indicated, we are looking at processes and how to deal with these types of properties.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. One last question to Ms. Schell. Refresh my memory. As council, did we ever receive a report in the past showing the longest, most outstanding pieces of property that have been in arrears? Has that been shared with council in the past?
As part of the tax sale process, a list of properties being registered is always shared with council for every tax sale. And that's usually in year 4 when we register them. And then we have that process of 1 year in which we try to get collection at that point. And a lot of times, most of these properties fall off. We may have a list of sometimes 20 or more properties. And when we get to tax sale, sometimes it's less than 10.
Okay, thank you. It's worst case scenario, by the time we act on it 4 years, the building could be unfortunately disrepair. So even if we want to purchase it and do something positive with it, it may be out of our hands. But thank you for the clarification and education. Thank you, that's all.
Okay, anybody else on 615? Seeing none, that is the end of your matters, Councillor Vezo-Allen, I believe.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, I had Councillor Gardy next.
I'll be quick, Mr. Mayor. Before I go to 610 film industry with a question to Mr. Anderson, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody at Public Works. They worked hard this weekend digging us out of that storm. So thanks for that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Anderson. I think a lot of council probably thinks it's quite important to approve the applications to the Economic Development Fund and the Tourism Development Fund for the film and television and digital media position, along with the other associated funding for marketing and attraction. Could you just kind of refresh our memory as to the economic impact film has had in our community, especially kind of pre-pandemic, and some of the stuff that we're looking to do to kind of build out some of these the partners in our build out for the partners in our community, getting back to it. Travis, could you do that for us, please? Or for me, please?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. The film industry, as you had mentioned, had its ups and downs over the past couple of years, namely COVID. But pre-COVID, we were looking at an average annual spend of roughly 4.3 million in the community. Overall, since 2019, we've had 16 productions in Sault Ste. Marie for a total of 8.6 million. And it also resulted in roughly 9,000 room nights, hotel night stays. The beauty and I think the benefit of film, particularly during this period, is those that are truly benefiting are the hotel and hospitality sector, which, as we all know, has been hard hit due to COVID. So I think that's a real positive because of the industry here and the amount of people that are coming to the community. The other strong economic injection that we have had is due to the efforts of our film, television, and digital media coordinator. We were able to support the attraction of Rolling Picture Company. They're a post-production company that set up shop, purchased a building on Queen Street, and have invested just over $1 million to date. They have 7 full-time employees, 6 of which are recent grads from Algoma University and Sioux College.
Thanks. And through you, Mr. Mayor, just to Travis, when you were speaking about that downtime in our kind of tourism season, those say 4 months or so, is that something in your marketing efforts you really drive home to production companies about the benefit of our location as it relates to like filming in the winter and kind of our natural surroundings and how conducive they are to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, it is something that we do put forth as a benefit for filming in Sault Ste. Marie. Over the years, we've had a number of productions that have filmed between the call it the January to April period, and as we look forward to 2022 and the tentative film schedule that we do have, there are a number of productions that are tentatively slate for that period as well.
Perfect. Thanks. Nothing else, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else on 610? Was that you, Councillor Dufour? Were you putting your hand up on that? No? Okay. And that's all your matters in, Councillor Gardy? Okay. So I have Councillor Scott and Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Christian may have been ahead of me.
Okay. Well, Christian and Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Scott. 6.3, active transportation master plan. I think I'll direct this to Mr. Ver, and he could sub it out if he needs to. I'm looking at the report. It says that the $139,000 to fund this is going to come from $699,000 of the future Sault Ste. Marie carryover, leaving $500,000+ left over. Is that money earmarked for anything at this point? The remainder of the roughly 550?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, the remainder of those funds we had put forward to FedNor to advance a number of projects. So all of that remaining funding has been allocated towards different projects.
Okay, thank you. Just to refresh my memory, once this master plan comes back, I would think that we would, either this council or next, would probably start to implement some of the strategies and plans from the report. Have we identified where the funding sources for those steps or elements of the project will come from?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, at this stage, we haven't specifically identified the sources for that. We're going to wait till we complete the report and look at the scale of it. And certainly we're always looking for different funding programs and ways to implement this. I think the good news is we've seen a number of funding programs from the federal and provincial government as it relates to active transportation. So we're hopeful we'll have a number of projects that line up well with these funding sources.
Fair enough. One final question on this. Excuse me. And I asked this question for the benefit and consideration of this council and the next council. Do we have any indication as to when this report will come back and when we can conceivably have to consider the implications of the report and when we might have to start implementing some of its findings?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. For that, I will refer that question to Don McConnell. He's been involved with some of our discussions with our consultants on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, the report will be complete in September.
So, okay, so essentially this report will get it, but essentially it will be a project and a report to be considered much more fulsomely by the next council. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor, on 6.3.
Councillor Shoemaker, you had 6.3 on your list.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, either Mr. McConnell or Mr. Vare, if the city wanted to indicate that its top active transportation priority was a connection of the hub trail to the James Street area, which I intend to propose at a council meeting in the near future, would that be something that this active transportation master plan would necessarily have to take into account and rank, or is that not how the plan's going to work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, the plan looks at a number of different things, and one of them will be to prioritize different projects for council. I think this would be very helpful to council going forward for budget purposes and also when making applications to senior levels of government. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of public consultation involved with this. There is a staff steering committee in place for this, and I have no doubt that that is one of the projects that will be considered close to the top of the list. But at this point, I mean, we haven't begun the study. I can't say that with certainty, but it has been identified as a priority by several members of council. We're aware of that.
Yeah, okay. And I guess my point is more, you're looking at it on the flip side of the coin from where I am. I think if there's a motion at council in January, which there will be, to indicate that this is our top priority as a council, provided that passes, will I guess the drafters of the report will necessarily have to rank that higher because it's been identified as the top priority.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, will certainly be taken into consideration. Yes. I mean, council always has the ability to establish their top priority regardless of the outcomes of the report, but I would expect that would be a very highly ranked priority. Okay. I think all parties are in agreement with that.
Thank you.
Is that it, Councillor Shoemaker on 6.3?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth on 6.3?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment, a positive comment. I just wanted to say I'm happy that Councillor Shoemaker has emphasized that. I think we have said that many times as council that that particular area of the community needs continuous support and attention. So I just want to give a shout out that Councillor Shoemaker is so right. Thank you.
Anybody else in 6.3? Okay, that would be Councillor Christian, back to you. Anything else in the consent agenda?
A couple more quickly. 6.4, professional services, assessment and property taxation support. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess to Michelle. I'm just wondering if you can touch on what are the current challenges with this area as far as staff is concerned that have led us to seeking this type of service. Can you just summarize it briefly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, we've always reached out to outside professionals when we have large assessment challenges. We don't have the resources in-house to do this. As noted as well at our budget meetings, we used to have additional support provided to them for our assessment-based management system, and we have removed that now from our RFP and for a savings of about $65,000 a year.
Okay, so in terms of the types of services that this company will provide, is this when we get into discussions with property owners over taxes owing or the assessed value of their properties when determining taxes owing?
The discussions and when we engage them are usually for much larger assessment appeals. So a lot of the special assessments, such as for shopping centers, industrial and manufacturing, that type of thing, where there's a specialty, as well as if there's an issue where it might be something that is Ontario-wide, and there might be a working group that they can participate in and represent various groups on it. Okay. They also assist us with our tax capping calculations, which are very onerous and difficult, and they have the expertise in-house to assist us with that.
Okay, that makes sense. One final question on this. As far as their services go, it sounds like it's generally pay as we go as opposed to a flat rate. So in other words, they provide a service and we have a rough idea of how much activity is going to be required of them. So we budget accordingly. Is that accurate?
We budget based on a trend. Typically, when you have a reassessment year, which has been deferred once again until 2024, we will have more assessment appeals at that time. But we're finding there's some different ones coming through due to COVID and different challenges to their assessment or different section appeals that they can apply for. So that's where we would reach out for their expertise. And again, it's based on trends. So they're more or less on a retainer. Some years we won't need them. Other years we may actually exceed the amount that's in our estimate in the budget, which hopefully doesn't happen too often.
So when we, just so I'm clear, so when we establish, I think the report said roughly 50,000 for the year. That's a flat rate?
We don't pay them 50,000 a year flat rate. It'll be based on an hourly rate for when we engage them.
All right. Okay.
They're on retainer. That's our estimate for our budget.
Okay. Thank you. Good enough. That's it for me on that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Anybody else in 6-4? Okay, Councillor Christian, you said you had another one?
Yeah, just a quick thank you, 6.6 to Kiwanis of Lakeshore for their contribution. I just want to recognize them for their generosity. They were quite generous with the splash pad at Bellevue Park, and they can continue to contribute to youth activities. And I just want to make sure they got proper recognition through our council meeting tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So anybody else in 6-6? Councillor Scott, Councillor Dufour, were you on 6-6?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Councillor Christian's comments. I think the level of support from Kiwanis Club of Lakeshore has been tremendous. I think that we know too. I think that the Rosedale Park is a great location for this donation. I think it's going to make a significant difference to the community in the area. And I know social services is hard at work continuing to leverage those investments for that neighborhood. So thank you very much, Kiwanis of Lakeshore.
Thank you, Councillor Dufour. Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By letting Councillor Christian go ahead of me, I'm good. He asked everything I was going to ask, so thank you.
I'm back to Councillor Dufour then.
I was on 6.6, Mr. Mayor. Thanks very much.
Okay. Any other councillors have matters on consent? Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, just that I'd like to pull 6.9 from consent, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, 6.9 is pulled. Any other matters on consent? Madam Clerk, if we can deal with the consent agenda then.
A motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that all the items listed under date December 13, 2021, agenda item 6, consent agenda, save and accept agenda item
6.9.
6.9 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion carried. That would bring us, Madam Clerk, I believe, 6.9. Councillor Shoemaker, you had that pulled. Do you want to speak to it, or do you just want it voted on separately?
Yeah, I'd just like to indicate, Mr. Mayor, that I've pulled it because I intend to vote against it. I've expressed in the past that I thought that the costs for the downtown plaza had increased too much. This is another use of municipal resources. While it's not city funding directly, it's an indirect city fund. And it's another example, in my opinion, of the how the costs on this one have increased beyond what I was prepared to support initially when I approved of what I thought was a good concept. But those are my reasons for voting against this tonight.
Anybody else on that matter? Okay, all in favor of 6.9? Opposed to 6.9? So Bruni, Shoemaker, Scott opposed, the remainder in favor.
The electronic vote is open.
That brings us, Madam Clerk, to.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't have Councillor Vezo-Allen's vote.
He was in
Okay.
favor.
So I have Gardy, Hilsinger, Dufour, and Vezo-Allen in favor, Bruni, Scott, and Shoemaker opposed, and Christian, Nero, Hollingsworth, and Mayor Provenzano in favor.
That's correct. Bruni, Shoemaker, and Scott opposed.
That's what I have as well.
Yeah, okay.
Under agenda
Go ahead.
item 8.1, I have a motion by Councillors Gardy and Scott, whereas residents in the area of AIM Recycling on Carbon Beach Road have registered numerous complaints with AIM Recycling, city councilors and staff, as well as the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks concerning issues with the operations at the site, including but not exclusive to noise, emissions, site plan control, and traffic. And whereas the ministry and AIM Recycling are working on an environmental approval process that should address some of the issues but take a lengthy time to be completed. And whereas a number of Ontario municipalities control some aspects of salvage yard operations through business licensing bylaws. And whereas the move by Algoma Steel to electric arc steelmaking will result in an increased need for scrap metal as an input and may result in increased salvage or metal processing operations in Sault Ste. Marie. Now therefore be it resolved that staff review whether a business licensing approach can be used to address some of the concerns noted by residents in the area of AIM Recycling and by extension, the community at large concerning existing or future salvage or metal processing operations.
Okay, Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The motion's quite clear. I appreciate Councillor Scott for being willing to support it so enthusiastically earlier in the week. So there are a handful, I should say, of residents who have been quite vocal, who live in the vicinity to Ames manufacturing and recycling plant about how it's impacting their kind of day-to-day lives in and around their home and that of their homes. As I see it, they always resided close to a property that was zoned for such a facility and for such a business. But I think with AIM taking over, they've expanded not only some of what they do there beyond what the previous operator did, but the footprint as well. The Ministry of Environment has been cooperative in doing what they can do, and they're working on that. That's going to take a bit of time. As recently as today, I can tell you that AIM reached out to myself and to Councillor Scott, looking to kind of see what they can do to alleviate things even more. I know city staff has met internally about tackling this issue, and I look forward to a meeting hopefully soon by city staff and Ames management to see what further can be done. But I just thought it important, considering that there are some communities in the province who have bylaw or bylaws in and around this type of facility, to see what we can do to kind of mirror that without hampering what's going on within the business itself too much. So that's what the motion's about. And I'm hopeful that beyond Councillor Scott, I'll have a majority of council support for this. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Scott, would you like to speak to this too?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gardy covered everything.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to the authors. I just, perhaps Councillor Gardy, is the intent then to take this opportunity in dealing with AIM for a more robust sort of global approach to any other businesses that may pursue similar activities? You cited the need for scrap steel. So is this an opportunity to look at AIM and also more of a global approach for the community?
I'll answer it quickly, and then I'll defer to Mr. White if he's okay with that. But yeah, as I see it, for salvage yards specifically, to see what we can do to kind of limit the disturbance in terms of noise and vibration. Those are the issues that we're hearing a lot about. So I'll leave that to Mr. White to clean up if I wasn't as articulate as I should be.
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. If staff will review whether a business licensing bylaw approach is appropriate to address some of these concerns. But that approach would need to address all businesses that are in this, have this type of use. You can't have a bylaw that just is targeting one single business.
Agreed. I guess for what it's worth, I have personal friends in the area, and the issues come up several times. I guess their biggest concern is the level of noise and the amount of time during the day, the actual length of the activities. Anecdotally, I was told that, there are other scrap yards in the city that operate after 8 o'clock, and they're shut down by 5, and this company operates much beyond those hours. So I think that's what they're looking for in terms of at least noise reduction. It's the amount of time during the day that they're actually operating. So I just throw that out there.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the second time in my memory that this type of issue has been brought to council, not specifically on this property, but I am always disappointed when it requires a council resolution to get the attention of a corporate neighbor. And I brought one in the a couple of years ago on Walmart and their neighborly conduct with Superior Bakery, and it did bring them to the table and got that situation resolved. They're well on its way to being resolved at this point. I'm glad to hear that AIM has reached out to Councillor Gardy and Councillor Scott, but it really ought not to get to this point. I know some of the residents in the area, as Councillor Christian does personally, and they've reached out to AIM without much success, I've heard. So it ought not to get to our table to bring them to the table. And it's unfortunate that it has, but I'm glad that they're now communicating with the councillors of the area.
Anybody else on the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
Mr. Mayor, could I say one more thing just on that motion? I know it's been voted for. I just wanted to say off the top, I wanted to thank CAO White along with his staff for helping in the crafting of the motion itself. Their guidance was instrumental. Thanks.
I was just waiting for Councillor Christian. Are you in the affirmative?
Voted in favor.
Then it passes And under agenda item 8.2, I have a motion by councillors Vezo Allen and Hilsinger. Whereas the city of Sault Ste. Marie has a bylaw that regulates and licenses the operation of vehicles for hire or taxi service within Sault Ste. Marie. And whereas the Sault Ste. Marie Police Service is responsible for the enforcement of the bylaw. And whereas the city of Sault Ste. Marie issues the licenses approved in accord with the bylaw. Whereas there is some concern about licensed operators complying with the bylaw, specifically the provisions that relate to the requirement of wheelchair accessible taxi service. And whereas City Council wants to ensure that the bylaw is being properly administered and believes the administration thereof and the parties responsible for said administration should be assessed. Now therefore be it resolved that City Council directs the CAO in conjunction with Sault Ste. Marie Police Service to undertake whatever steps they collectively determine appropriate to assess how the administration and enforcement of the bylaw is operating as between the city and Sault Ste. Marie Police Service, and make a recommendation to council on how the bylaw should be administered on a go-forward basis.
Okay, so Councillor Vezo Allen, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to Councillor Hilsinger for seconding this motion with me. I really appreciate it. So this really speaks to under bylaw 2011-161, both 8.18 and 8.13. So 8.18, if you're 35 cars or less, it is required that you have one accessible vehicle available 24 hours in a day. And from my experience through the accessibility committee, and especially in terms of people getting to the hospital for renal dialysis, there has been some issues. And I just want to very briefly say, and this is right from the social worker at dialysis, I do have a dialysis patient who usually uses full fare paid for by ODSP for his dialysis purposes. The cab was again broken down. It has been unavailable at least on 5 separate occasions since September, according to my staff. So for those of you that may not be aware, if someone is on ODSP and if public paratransport isn't available, ODSP through the social worker will pay for full fare accessible transportation. So we know just on that instance that there is an issue, and it has come up several times during the accessibility committee, which I've sat on since 2018 at the election time. Also 8.13, that all operators must provide 24-hour service. Also, again, and it's mainly people that can't get transportation back from if they're at the ER. I've had a couple of calls from people waiting at the ER at Sioux Area Hospital that can't get home, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, as well as a couple of downtown bar owners saying that they can't get people cabs after midnight. And this isn't about a blame game. We know since COVID and with talking to some operators, it's a big difficulty in getting drivers. It's really taking a look at best practices. What do we need to do with the bylaw? How do we help so that there is safe, accessible transportation for people at these times? So I want to thank, again, Councillor Hilsinger, and this is about solutions, not blame. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vezo Allen. Councillor Hilsinger, do you want to add anything?
No, thank you. It's a hugely important issue, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Any councillors have any questions on the motion? All in favor? Okay, motion carries.
Councillor Christian?
I think, Councillor Christian, were you in favor? Yes, he was.
So that carries unanimously as well. Then we'll go to agenda item 11, bylaws. I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date December 13, 2021 be approved.
All in favor? Madam Clerk, before we move to pass the resolution for the closed session, and being that this is our last meeting of the year and we're heading into the the holiday season. I do want to just on behalf of all of City Council and City staff, myself and my family, wish everybody in the community the best of the holiday season. A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
So I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth. Resolved that this council move into closed session to discuss one item relating to the security of property of the municipality, one item that is a trade secret, and two items relating to a plan to be applied to negotiations. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to discuss the same matters without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? The council, I'll see you in a minute when we all log back in.